Good evening and welcome. My name is Desiree Foster, and I would like to thank you for attending this process that we have for our police chief to offer your feedback. Prior to Gary Peterson, our consultant and CNN analyst, Cedric Alexander comes on the stage, we're going to first have our city manager come up and give some comments and some remarks. And so if you could welcome at this time, City Manager Mark Washington.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Desiree is our Human Resources Director, and I want to thank her for the work that she has done in this process, her and her team. I want to thank our Public Information Office for being able to help us not only have the conversation here, but do it digitally where people who are unable to be here can be part of the conversation today. And thank you for coming out. And I want to thank the Wealthy Theater for hosting us this evening. And many of you already have your popcorn and drink to see the show. And we want it to be a show, but we want to be one in which you don't just watch, but what you're part of. You're part of the production of this important decision as we begin to think about the qualities that we want in a police chief. And we've been having a lot of conversations around strategies. Someone. Yeah, and I just want to open up just with a couple of things. We've been having a lot of conversation about the kind of city we want to be, and I know this community has done a lot of planning around a 20, 30-year vision around the master plan. We've also had lots of conversations every year about the annual fiscal plan, but in the interim, me and my staff have been talking to our commissioners about our strategic plan, which is a 3 to 5 year horizon. And some of the things that we've asked before we got into the plan itself, next slide, is talking about our values as an organization. What are the things that define who we are, no matter what it is we're doing? These are things that don't change no matter what the issues are. And several things we have agreed upon preliminarily as we're still in the process of finalizing the plan. Matter of fact, we have one of our commissioners here tonight. I want to thank Commissioner Kelly for being here this evening. We've talked about these 6 values as an organization, things that I expect of everyone on my leadership team, and that should cascade down to everyone in the city, and I want to share some of those with you. Accountability. We need to be a city that does what it promises, that we make good on our words, and that I know that the commission will hold me accountable, and I will hold people in my organization accountable for performance, and the public expects us to be held accountable to do exactly what we promise. We need to be an organization that is collaborative, that we collaborate within the city across departments, but we also collaborate with the community, such as this. I mean, this is a collaborative effort where we jointly describe and talk about the kind of things and qualities we want to see in future leaders in the organization. Also that we be an organization that prides itself in customer service. And I know tonight the focus is on community policing, and in many instances we do encounter people most often in cases where they are not breaking the law. Most of the time our police officers encounter people, they're just doing their normal, going about their normal daily routine. But there are times in which officers do encounter citizens that may be in a manner in which the law is being broken. And when I met with all the police officers, I met with 1,100 employees in our workforce, and we've had 20 plus meetings, and some of the meetings were at 5 in the morning roll call, and some in the evening. And when I talk to the officers, in addition to recognizing the kind of work they do and the challenges that they do, and encouraging them to also subscribe to the values and be collaborative with community. It's evident that officers don't always encounter people and view them as customers, particularly when the law is being broken and there's a criminal element. And what I said to them, I say to you today, is that customer service does not always mean the customer is right, particularly when there's an element of criminal activity. But what it does mean is that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter who they are, and no matter how we encounter them, that we have the respect for humanity and respect for people. The other is equity, and making sure that has been a part of the conversation in this community about looking at the lens of service through equity. We know that there have been people that have been marginalized and disproportionately impacted from some of the services within our community, and we want to be conscious of that and make sure that we are intentional about addressing some of those disparities. And innovation, that we can do things differently. And that I know that I am not necessarily the smartest person in the room always, nor will the new police chief be. And we have to find ways to do things new and creatively and do it with community. And sometimes the people that are closest to the problem, whether it is officers or it is community, may have suggestions on how we might improve the way in which we deliver services. And the other is sustainability, making sure that we not only pay attention to the things that are, triple bottom line of the people, planet, and prosperity, but we do things in a way where they're just not one-time fixes, that we just don't come together when there's a problem or crisis, but we have a relationship dialogue that's ongoing, that we can sustain it even beyond that. And what amazes me is when I was just sharing with Lionel earlier today, if we were in crisis mode, this place will be filled with people. But we're having an important conversation tonight that will help us to mitigate those things happening in the future. And at moments like this, I think we need to have as many or more people show up than wait until we're in a matter of crisis. So these are some of the values that we have been talking about, and we have identified about 7 priorities, and I'm not going to be able to go into detail on all of them, but you'll see the last one, safe community, it relates to the conversation tonight. We want to make sure our community remains safe. Grand Rapids is one of the safest communities in the state, in the Midwest, and we want to make sure that we continue to be a safe community. I didn't say perfect community. And we recognize, we like many other places, there are opportunities for us to be better. But the decision that is before me is one that is going to be vital to make sure that our next police chief is the kind of leader that is able to effectively lead the community and the department in being a safe community and doing it in a way that does policing with community and not just to community. I want somebody who's going to be fair both with officers, but also fair with community, and call right and wrong, no matter what the issue is. I want someone who is going to be tough on crime and is going to be able to take the difficult stance and make tough decisions, who's going to be a proven leader within the organization and within the community. And so those are kind of some of the qualities that I've said out loud publicly and I say tonight. But tonight is not about the kind of qualities I'd like to see in a chief. I'd like to be more informed about your preferences, your feedback, your concerns, and to help us, we have very capable people tonight. I think when we went through the process, some had asked whether or not it was necessary to engage a search firm. Why do we have to do that? And I think, number one, there are a lot of qualified men and women in the police department, and they are very capable of doing the job as police chief. It's evident right now. We got an interim police chief, and the department is still moving forward. But I wanted to make sure that this community deserves the best. And that we look both within and outside the department to make sure we hire the best person. And every police officer in the department has gone through process. They're used to that. They're used to that when they applied to become a police officer, and they go through a competitive process whenever they promote. And so this is no different, that we want a very competitive process in selecting the police chief. And we've hired partners with public sector search consultants, and Mr. Gary Peterson has proven to deliver results. He's helped cities all across the country hire chiefs from San Francisco to Seattle to Syracuse, Kansas City in the Midwest, Albany, New York. And he can share a little bit more about his experience, as well as in down south in Dallas. And I think you stole someone from Michigan to go to Dallas, right? Not stole, you recruited. I'll call the police. Dallas and Albany. So I want to thank them for their work that they've done and what they're going to do. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Gary. Let's give him a big hand as he comes.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Thank you, Mark. All right. Good evening. I also want to welcome you to this very important event. We really are here to get your perspective on what's needed in the next police chief. So let me, I already have it up here. So those are some of the searches that we've done. Mark's already alluded to them. I have 30 years of combined experience in policing and recruiting. Spent nearly 27 years in a small city in California called the city of Martinez. My last several years were as police chief. So, all right. Did I miss one? Okay. Hold on. All right. So with me tonight is a colleague, Desiree started to introduce him, Dr. Cedric Alexander. He assists with community engagement, and he's a consultant as well. Served more than 40 years in various public agencies and public service. Most recently, the deputy mayor of Rochester, New York. He's been a police chief at 2 different organizations, DeKalb County, City of Rochester, New York. He's a TSA Federal Security Director. He was the president of the NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and he served on President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. He's an author, frequent contributor on CNN, and he'll be assisting tonight and facilitating. Before we get to that, I want to talk to you about the search process. So the evolution of a search starts with defining the qualities and qualifications that you want in the next chief. And you do that a variety of ways, but mainly talking to internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. This is my second visit to Grand Rapids. And my first visit, I spoke with a number of internal stakeholders, including several department heads and directors, several police officers, the union, of course the city manager, and other staff members and some additional stakeholders. And over the last couple days, Cedric and I have talked to a number of stakeholder groups, nonprofits, clergy, partners, to get their perspective. And last night we held a community meeting at City Hall. And tonight, obviously, we want to get your perspective. So we take all the information that we get in the community meetings and we develop a candidate profile. We use a job description, all the information, coalesce it, and distill it into an advertising piece. That advertising piece goes out to a number of organizations that advance law enforcement and are locations that are likely to find candidates that we're looking for. We also identify and recruit candidates through a number of means, including a proprietary software. Then we screen the candidates. and then we bring them on site for interviews. And there's a selection process here in Grand Rapids. And then ultimately, all that information is put together, and your city manager, Mark Washington, will make the decision of who's going to be the next chief, utilizing all that information. So these are some of the advertising locations we use. I'll give you a few minutes to digest that. So advertising with these organizations is helpful because there's thousands of law enforcement executives who are members of these organizations. Some are looking for to be police chiefs, some aren't. And so this is one of the methods we use to advertise the piece. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Alexander to come up, and he's going to facilitate the discussion.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Thank you. Thank you for having myself and Gary to be here with you tonight, and thank you too, Mr. Washington. Probably one of the most important things that you're going to do is have input in terms of who's going to be your next police chief. And that is probably one of the most high profile, one of the most sensitive positions in government anywhere. And having chiefed in 2 different cities across the country, I can tell you it is, particularly today, a very challenging process because we live in a very different time and expectations are much greater than ever before for chiefs and those who are applying to become police chiefs. So tonight is really an opportunity to hear from you all, the citizens of this community, and you give input very straightforwardly, honestly, in terms of what you would like to see in a chief that will represent your city both locally and nationally, as he or she may happen to travel across the country. So we're delighted to be here, and I'm not going to delay this any longer, but the question I think is pretty straightforward there, and I like to hear we would like to hear your responses. But if you think about those of you who grew up in this community or came here from somewhere else, have had previous experience in government in terms of working with government or relying on government to help you throughout your daily lives, whether it's through fire service, police service, snow removal, or whatever that it may happen to be. But tonight we get to talk about who you would like to see, what kind of person you would like to see as your next chief of police. And that's the question I pose to you. What would you like to see? What characteristics, what personality traits, what experience would it be that you would like to see in the next police chief in the city of Grand Rapids? So, anybody? Yeah, you can come right to the mic. A woman. Okay. I don't know. Has there been? No. None that we're aware of. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Could we yeah, we're going to need a mic. Yeah. So if you got a question, just come up, get in line in the aisle, and or if it comes to you later, feel free to get in line in the aisle and feel comfortable answering any questions you have. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Someone who is concerned with regards to the humanity of the community and does not see just black or brown or white. I work in a capacity where I get to see a lot of video from our local police department, and as a mother and just a person that is concerned about the humanity of another, I've watched multiple videos where I've literally just bawled because I could see the officers who were dealing with those black and brown children didn't see the humanity in them. They saw a little person of color. They saw a person of color, and that is a concern for me. I'd like to see that, as well as someone who is culturally competent that will require that of their department and not be afraid to stand up for those values. Also, someone that is not afraid to take disciplinary action. One of the things I've seen as well is I've seen the officers cover body cams. And it just seemed to me, if it's so relevant that we have body cams because we want to see what's going on, that an officer is not disciplined because they're, impeding that process, that's a problem for me. That's a problem for our community. And so I'd like to see someone that would be willing to also look at the data. The data doesn't lie. The lack of diversity in our community, the over-policing of the black and brown communities is very evident if we look at the data. So I would like someone that's willing to look at the data and be clear to take action toward equity in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Anybody else? What would you like to see in the next leader? We're taking notes, we're jotting them down because they will become part of an overall report to help assist us in the type of qualifications that you would like to see in your next chief of police. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Michael Booker.
Talk into the mic there, Mr. Booker.
My name is Michael Booker, and what I like to see in a police chief, it's very personal to me. My dad was a police officer for 25 years in Grand Rapids as a sergeant on the police force, and back in those days, I mean, you alluded to it, it's a different time now, but I always resort back in those days growing up as a cop kid. And I tell my friends all the time, I was in jail from day one. It was 7 of us boys and 1 sister. But the thing that stood out to me is that I grew up with a new person in my household every day because Dad was on the force 24/7, and I hardly ever saw him. And the fact that he gave his life for the city and his service to the city meant a lot to me. And I saw the division that was going on back in the 60s, as well as during the riot times when the police department was divided. The black officers patrolled the black areas and the white officers patrolled the white areas. And very soon we saw people of color that we knew we could relate to. But back then it was community. And that community said something because everybody on the block knew who the officer was in that community and how they related to. So if we get a person of color, the fact that he's black shows that he has experience in the community. So my thing is, if it's not a person of color, get somebody who closely resembles that. Compassion. As the sister said, a lack of compassion on our kids. Because we see with our own eyes the effect of an officer coming down on our kids, pulling guns. And we don't want to see that no more in our kids. We're in a safe city. This Grand Rapids is earmarked to be one of the safest cities in the United States, but we still have eternal issues. We still have problems. So I want to have a police chief not afraid to stand up against the police union, against the police rank and file, and stand on his own 2 feet and have a heart for the city. That's my spew. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Rachel Lee. I live in the 2nd Ward. I'm very familiar with our community police officers by the day. And community policing, I think, is it's just not a daytime thing. For me, I think it's very important for our neighborhood that community policing is also a nighttime thing. Those relationships that are built with our community police officers are very valuable. And I think that, it's not just a first shift thing, it's a second shift thing too. And so a chief that understands the importance of community policing and how that can impact neighborhoods. The second thing is just along the lines of compassion, empathy. In all the stories that I've seen in the last year, rarely did we ever hear, "I'm sorry." And I think, empathy is a big thing because sometimes, there are mistakes that are made, and, apologizing for that, I think would go a long way.
So let me ask a question, and anybody else can certainly feel free to come up and respond. But when you hear the term community policing, what does that mean to you? How do you understand that term, community policing?
Establishing relationships, understanding the context of a neighborhood, understanding the history of the neighborhood. You know, in my neighborhood, we have a lot of new people moving in, and we have certain people that ride their bikes around and collect pop cans, you know, who've been doing it for years and are harmless. And so, you know, and then new people come into the neighborhood and they're nervous about that, call the police on that person. And so it's just those established relationships that help minimize situations and issues because of the relationships that have been built.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else wanted to respond to that in terms of how you see or understand community policing? Because I'm going to go back over some of this in a few minutes, but yes, ma'am, go right ahead.
Hello, my name is Cassandra Wolf, and I am part of the disability community here in Grand Rapids, both personally and professionally. And one thing that I've really admired about the city overall is that the focus on equity has also included people with disabilities in our community, and that's something that I'm really passionate about when it comes to searching for our next police chief. Disability is the largest minority in the United States. It cuts across race, gender, orientation, social class. And so often people with disabilities have invisible disabilities, and I think it would do very well for our community to have a police chief who was committed to empathy training when it came to mental illness and physical disabilities, and also having just an awareness so that can remove kind of the stigmatization that surrounds what those disabilities could mean for people who are interacting with the system. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Anyone else, please? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Deborah Roy, and my concern is with mental illness and gun violence. I'm a mother that is experiencing that because of my son having a mental illness, and he was able to purchase a gun within a week. Within a week, he's special needs. And I'm like, how was he able to do that? It should be more attention given to that. What happened to using stun guns? What happened to using the plastic bullets? What happened to all of that? It seemed like they're so quick to pull out the gun. What happened to using those things the police used to use? And why was it so easy for my son to get a gun off the streets? I don't understand that. I think it should be more attention given to that.
So you would like to see the next chief provide, talk about, think about giving more attention to the number of guns that are out on the street. How do we get them off the street? How do we keep young people like your son safe from guns, right?
Yeah.
That's something you would like to see from the next chief.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Carl Kelly, and I'm a longtime resident of Grand Rapids. And first of all, I want to thank you very much for the whole process that we're going through here. One of the things that I think is most important for a chief of police, is someone with social work background, experience, and appreciation of, but I think it'd be good to have that kind of leader leading our police department, someone with that kind of sensibility.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Tracy Olmstead, and my husband Russ went through the Citizens Police Academy a while ago, and as a result, I had the opportunity to read their training manual. And one of the things I was disturbed by was that if you read the wording of the manual, it talks about controlling a situation, staying in control of a situation. But the vocabulary equates control with force, and it equates force with guns. I would like to see somebody who has a much more mature understanding of power and provides training in de-escalation. and talks about other ways of controlling a situation. You can control a situation with humor. You can control a situation with compassion. You can control it with communication. And I think that somebody with that mindset who can make sure that that training is provided for all officers, and that the understanding that that is preferable to force, and that power is not the equivalent, force is not the equivalent of power, and that we need to use our power better within the community and for policing.
Great, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak. I think I speak on behalf of the community. We really don't care if you've been a police chief in the past or a deputy police chief. If you just have a good track record of good policing, you can learn the administrative stuff later. That's what we want. A person that is unequivocally just known nothing more than just a good police officer. Secondly, we want somebody that has a proven track record of actually working in a community that is black, brown, and white. Don't come from a rural farm development. Don't come from a suburb. Come from a city that looked like Grand Rapids. And then I guess lastly, we want somebody that has a track record who actually has gone into communities and has destigmatized some of the negative stereotypes that police officers might have. We don't want theories. We want somebody that's actually taking their theory into practical application.
Okay, great. So let's just take a moment, if you would, sir. If we could just take a moment, kind of recap a little bit and talk just a little bit about some of these things that have already been stated. In humanity, which was at the top of the list, and to me, quite frankly, is something we would like to think about as being very basic and common for most people. And there are times when it is, and there are times when it is not, quite frankly. But I said it last night, and I'll say it again tonight. I think something that is very, very important to be a leader, and one thing to look for in a police chief is someone who has a sense of humanity. And that is not something you can teach. That is something that you learn. You learn that in your family of origin. You learn that in communities you come from. You learn that as a result of having compassion, which was the next term that was used, towards people. So you cannot teach that in a classroom. That is something that you've learned throughout the course of your life, where you care about people other than yourself. And that comes through us being, we certainly all come from different walks of life. We have different experiences. But you truly have to have a chief of police who truly love people and care about people, care about the welfare of people, regardless of where they're from and what they do. And just listening to the citizen who just came up, I want more than someone who's been a police officer. I want someone who's a good human being, someone who actually care about people. And those are the kind of, right at the top of the list for me, that I would certainly look for. Very basic, very fundamental, and everything is built off of that. Understanding that that chief truly does care about people and all kind of people. Culturally competent. What does that mean? What does culturally competence mean? We have thousands of different cultures, hundreds of different cultures right here in your city. Hundreds of different cultures. If you were to say to me, well, Chief Alexander, I want you to be culturally competent, which means what you're saying to me, you want me to know all the nuances, histories of every culture that exists in this community. Is that humanly possible? It's not humanly possible. But here's what is humanly possible. That regardless of who you are, where you're from, regardless of your religious relationship, your sexual orientation, your gender, your ethnicity, any of it, it does not matter. The most important thing is that I recognize and respect who you are and where you're from and your experiences and your culture. That's cultural competence. going back to what? Going back to being humane towards all people. Because we cannot, none of us cannot be aware of all the variety of different cultures that are out there, but regardless of who we come in contact with as a leader, and particularly as a chief, my job is to role model the type of behavior that I want from the top of the organization to the bottom of it. And that's hugely important for all of us. And you want someone that's not up here, but also have emotional intelligence, which means that they don't respond based on their emotions, but they respond based on logic. They respond based on data that is given to be accurate and is based in science. We all are emotional people, but if something happens and go wrong in the police department that you have concerns about and you ask me about it, my response is not to fight with you. My response is to hear you and make some sense, help make some sense as to what occurred the very best I can. You don't need a chief that's going to be defensive. You don't need a chief that's going to disregard what you're thinking and what you're experiencing, right? But someone who can remove his or her own feelings out of the way and stay in tune to what the issues are and respond to you in a way in which to help you understand what's going on, right? We all struggle with our emotions because we all are human beings. But when you're a chief of police in a moderate-sized American city, such as you have here in Grand Rapids, and you're going to have things that are going to occur that's going to create and bring attention to the city manager's office, to your community, and the community at large, you got to have a chief that can stand there and not become emotionally engaged, but one who can intellectually respond to whatever that challenge may happen to be, and in a way to help the community to understand what's going on and not be defensive. And if we go on being empathetic, hugely important, mental illness. I will tell you, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I've done a lot of clinical work over the years. And we know this for a fact, in virtually every city across this country, the greatest number of calls that police officers respond to in many cities have a mental health component attached to them. The greatest majority of them. So when you talk about mental health, you also want a chief who's someone who thinks about mental health. They think about homelessness and how over 80% of the homeless population struggle with a mental illness, whether it's drugs or alcohol or depression, or whether it's schizophrenic or being schizophrenic, whatever the case may happen to be. That is huge. How do you, chief of police, potential chief of police for my city, how are you going to address the mental health issues that are prevalent in this community that we live in? You want to hear that response, and not just hear about what you're going to do, but can you demonstrate to us what you have done in the past? What kind of programs have you created? What have you proposed? What have worked? And what do you see what may work well here, right? So those are great. De-escalation training, huge. That came on the scene within the last several years. That comes straight out of the 21st Century Task Force report, is training our officers to try to diffuse situations before they get bad. And that comes through training. And those are very important elements. And experience in diverse communities, hugely important. The face of America is changing every day. We're a community of a variety of different people and a variety of different cultures. It becomes hugely important that when we can have an opportunity, and you hopefully will have this opportunity to talk to a chief, tell us of your experience of working with diverse communities, wherever you may have come from. Those are great points that you bring up tonight in terms of what it is you would like to see in a chief, but let's dig a little bit deeper, and what are some other things that you would like to see, or maybe we can go to the next slide, and talk just a little bit more about what is it that you would like to see, what are your expectations, and what changes do you hope the next leader will bring to your department? So, come on up.
I'm back
Come
again.
on up.
I have to leave, so I have a couple things I just would like to say. I would like to see, you just finished up on diversity. Someone who understands that diversity does not just mean white women. That's really large. We are often, as black people, brown people, black women, we are left out of the diversity conversation a lot, and it's starting to look like white women meets the quota, and that's okay. And Grand Rapids has been really big on that as well. As so we have some police academies here locally that have some wonderful minority students that are in those groups. And they seem to have trouble getting into our local police department. And that the diversity in hiring has been lackluster for many, many years. And so I'd like to see some effort to support those students that are attending these local programs, fair as GRCC and Grand Valley's program. A lot of those students are coming right from the Grand Rapids area, and they are investing in wanting to be a police officer, and they cannot be hired in the city that they grew up in or the city that they love. I've actually been on the receiving end of that, interviewed for GRPD years and years and years ago.
You got to tell me what it is that you want now.
So, but what I want someone that understands what diversity in hiring is, and specifically understanding that it's not just meeting a quota through white women.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming tonight and participating. Who's next? Yes, sir.
How you doing? My name is Sammy Publius. I'm a resident of the 3rd Ward, and I've lived in Grand Rapids since 1988. I think what you've heard tonight and what we've always heard from these listening sessions is accountability, and nothing's going to change until culture change happens within the police department. We understand about the Blue Mafia and how they have to protect each other and all of that, and I actually understand it. I have empathy for that system because I understand that it's about covering each other's lives when you're out there. What I don't understand is why our kids have to get thrown on the ground and get handcuffs, and black and brown people are getting shot when you have all these white serial killers talking it out and not being shot after murdering tens of people. So my point is, the culture change that we're looking for may not happen through this, but just so you know, we've done this before. We've been through all of this before. Culture change, at the end of the day, all these listening sessions are great. We've been talking our face off for years about this. At the end of the day, is accountability. Get out of your cars. Don't approach a basketball court with your hand on your gun. Get to know your community. You talked about understanding cultural context. I think you can. It's called understanding your community. And the only way you do that is getting out of your car and understanding your community. I'm a person of color that lives in the hood, right? I don't like criminals just like the next person, right? I'm not trying to protect a criminal. While at the same time, if I know somebody committed a murder, I'd much rather talk to the cop that I know on my block than some dude that's gonna come in, guns blazing, and shoot whoever that looks like that type. You understand what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, it's culture change, and it's not gonna change in Grand Rapids for a long time, but that's what we're looking for, culture change.
All right, so, and I appreciate your remarks, and I need to respond to that on a couple of different levels. So, not as a point of correction, sir, but just as a point of observation. This is not a listening session in terms of all the things that you know and you may have a concern about as it relates to the police department. What you stated, probably the majority of the people in this room agree with. And I'm not even from this community, but I've traveled and been through and been around enough communities over the last several years to know that the issues that you're concerned about here are also issues in other cities across America. In 2014, when President Obama appointed the task force on 21st century policing, the whole objective was for policing to take a look at itself and to develop a roadmap. That's what that whole piece was about, develop a roadmap to advance policing in this country. We have been doing that for a number of years, and we've been more pointed about it over the last several years. And I would like to leave you with a sense of hope because of your leadership with your city manager. We're going to do everything that we can to make sure that you get the type of police chief, and that's why you're here tonight, to provide your input, that you get the type of police chief that you need that will orchestrate cultural change in Grand Rapids. It has been done in other cities across America. There's a lot of talented people out there, and it can happen in your city. But I don't ever want you to become hopeless and to feel that it's not going to change here. You got great leadership. You got new leadership in your city manager, someone who's committed, and you're committed. But you being here tonight telling us what it is that you want, our job is to make sure that we go out and find that chief regardless of who it is, man, woman. We don't care what their sexual preference is. We don't care what their religious preference is. We're going to find you the very best. We're going to select a number of people that your city manager will have an opportunity, and you'd have an opportunity to meet and talk to and do the things that you want done in this city. And that is to help change the culture, because this is your police department. It doesn't belong to the police department. This is your police department. It is a partnership between Grand Rapids Police and the community. Police cannot be effective without you, and you cannot be safe without police. It is a partnership. That is what it was found upon. But it took some different directions over the course of history, right? But the reality of it is the partnership is between the both of you. And that's what Mr. Washington is making every attempt to make sure that you have an opportunity to pick the very best chief, so that you don't feel this sense of hopelessness that nothing is going to change. Keep hope alive.
He said keep hope alive.
Seriously.
I'm in community every day. I got plenty of hope.
And keep fighting, keep having a voice, keep telling your leadership what it is that you need in order to have the kind of chief that you feel good about, right? Because it's doable and it can happen. It's doable and it can happen. All right? Yes, sir.
So in terms of what changes, so they mentioned in the last question that they like to see the chief. Somebody said they'd like to see the chief stand up to the union. I like to see the chief with enough backbone to stand up to other police officers as well. We've had a couple of incidents that in the past, historically, where we thought from the community perspective that the chief did the right thing and said the right thing, and then as soon as the other officers, the rank and file, decided that they didn't like it, they put pressure on the chief and he changed his mind. That's a problem. We need somebody who's tough enough to say, this is the right thing, I'm gonna stick with it. So that's that. And secondly, I don't know that I agree all the way with this being cool with the blue code of conduct and all that. Okay, well, maybe I misinterpreted, but when you said that, it took me right back to the incident that we had when the police were covering up for like some prosecutor or somebody that hit somebody and hit a car, and the secret tapes and all that leaking and stuff. That's a problem. So we need transparency and honesty, and then it still goes back to having a backbone to say, look, this ain't gonna happen, not on my watch. Somebody that's brave enough to say that and stand up and have the resources, national in scope, to collectively engage with other chiefs of police that also practice that same behavior in other cities, so they're just not subjected to the bias of the rank and file in the GRPD. So that's some of the changes I like to see in the next leader.
So let me sum that up in 3 words. You need a chief that is strong, that is going to be courageous and going to be bold and is going to draw a line in the sand, and to be able to say to the rank and file or anyone else, here's how we're going to operate as a police department. We're going to operate with integrity.
There you go.
And when you have an incident to occur, that can create a perception, real or perceived, of some impropriety, you want a chief that's going to come out and tell the community, here's what we know, and here's what's acceptable, and here's what's not acceptable.
Exactly.
And we're going to allow due process to take place in all fairness to everyone involved. But you want someone who is going to be open and verbal and transparent and going to keep you abreast of what's going on, right? That's the kind of chief that you want. That's the kind of chief, when we talk about transparency, nothing is hidden. Every general order, many departments across the country today, Mr. Washington, have taken their general orders, their day-to-day policies in their police departments, they posted it up online so that you, the public, can go and look at their policies every day, anytime you want to. There are no secrets. It can't operate as a clandestine machine. This whole blue code of silence thing, let me say something to you. Every police officer don't buy into that. They don't. Because you also have police officers, I'm quite sure in this department as well here, who will say to you, we want to be a department of integrity. We want to be the department in which we're being held accountable. That will come through the leadership of the next chief that you will pick to run your department. Because inasmuch as you want good, strong, stable, and courageous leadership, so do they. But it has to be about doing what's right, not sometime, but all the time. And understanding that people make mistakes, you take each case individually, but you have the confidence that he or she, whoever your next chief is going to be honest and forthright with you. So when you see them come on the evening news to talk about any incident that raises the concern of this community, you feel a sense they're being honest with you. President Obama said it best when we sit at the table with him 4 years ago. You can give a police officer a gun, you can give them a badge, you can train them, you can give them all these things to go out and be a police officer. But it's you, the citizen, who give them legitimacy. You give them legitimacy. And that is earned. It is not given, it is earned. We have a responsibility to be respectful of police. We have a responsibility to be supportive of our police. But we also, on the police side, have a responsibility to be honest and forthright and utilize procedural justice when it comes to the people that we serve. That is what you want in a police chief. That is what you're saying here. You take all that you put up there thus far, that's what you're saying. You want somebody that you can trust, somebody that's going to be honest, and somebody that you can put legitimacy inside your agency. And they treat everybody the same, all the time, not some of the time, all the time. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Faith Hoekstra, and I wrote down a couple of things that I wanted to say coming here tonight. The first thing is mostly what everyone has already said so far. Like, I want the police chief to be culturally competent, and I just wanted to add my voice to that too. But I think everyone said it pretty well already. And then I am a head lifeguard on the Lake Michigan, and so I've worked with the police departments, and I was an EMT also. And so one thing I'd like to see is all the EMS systems working well together. And and also, as I think there's some similarities between my job and policing. I'm trying to prevent accidents from happening. It used to be lifeguarding was mostly responding to emergencies, but just like I'm trying to prevent emergencies from happening, I'd like to see prevention as a bigger thing in the police department. I don't know if they do that a lot already, but yeah, prevention as in, like, I know one thing I know about is like providing more jobs for people helps, like reduction of crime. I don't know what else exactly the police department would want to do with prevention, But, and also I'd like to see like more public service announcements for like how to relate to your police officer. And I think you could have like some funny ones, and just so it's more like not a scary interaction with the police. I live in a really diverse neighborhood, like 2 blocks that way, and I would like the police chief to understand that kind of neighborhood. So, yeah, communication and prevention.
Thank you very much.
I also had the opportunity to attend the Citizen Police Academy last year, and one of the things I observed was the Grand Rapids Police Department is very tactically well-trained. But I would really like a police chief who understands the difference between being tactical and being strategic. Because strategy is, tactical is why these people can keep shooting black and brown people and get away with it, because they were tactically accurate. But there's something to be said about strategic. And I would like a police chief that understands that. I would also like a police chief who understands that he or she is a public servant, and also to convey that message to his rank and file, that they also are public servants. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
A public safety system that is proactive and also accessible to all residents. In particular, I think I would really drill it down to how we look at individuals who are our children in our community, and what are the possible innovative changes to really make sure we are not doing harm to those individuals in particular. So I think about other communities. I think in the state of California, they're really working on trying to remove sort of the juvenile justice frame out of corrections, out of policing. And so youth and how policing with them should be different than with adults.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi. My name is Beloved, and 2 things that I would like to see in our chief. Just a little bit? Okay. What I've noticed is that when a major incident happened within our community, someone may call a meeting and call it a Speak the Truth meeting, where they allow the community to come in and just, to myself, I would say to vent, to get all the frustrations out in order to calm the community down. However, with the chief being at hand, when you say something and you want to answer, he'll say, why don't you call my office and set up an appointment? Our questions are not getting asked. I feel if we come out to speak to the chief or the panel, we want answers then instead of being pushed off. And then those answers are never answered. We're still in the dark. I feel it was just a calm you down session. Also, I would like our new chief to be able to present the community, our parents, and the school systems with the bylaws of how they will handle our youth. Because it seems like that's up in the air of it's a new procedure, but no one knows the procedure. And if the parents are able to speak with their children about it, once we get a clear understanding, then it will be a little bit more of what will be tolerated. If we don't like it, or it's something that we do not agree with, then we need to have a meeting with the chief, and we can sit down and come together on better bylaws to help the community and to help everyone get an understanding of what's going to go on. Just from past experiences, it's what the police want to do. Now, although the police they're here to serve and protect, that's what we need to do, but we also need to know as parents, how are you protecting if you're abusing the authority you have? So that's what I would like to, for our chief to be able to explain to everyone.
So you want a chief that's not going to, when you ask him or her a question around a particular issue or something that come up in community of concern, you don't want someone who's just going to pacify you with a response, but someone that's going to be honest with you, and you feel that sense of genuineness in their response to you. And if they don't know the answer, it's okay to say that they don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out, and someone actually follows up with you.
Well, just not with me. I feel if the community can come together in a room to address a particular incident or a situation, that chief should be able to address that community and answer that question in front of the community, just as we came out. We don't need a 2-minute session in order to vent, to calm us down, but yet and still when we leave, the parents or the victim parents is still feeling like, what did I come out for? There wasn't anything done. So those are the things that we're looking
Somebody
for.
who's going to provide you with some answers.
Right then and there.
Right
Not-
then and there.
Not call me on the phone and schedule an
Right.
appointment and we'll
But
take
even
care of
if
it.
I were your chief and I say to you, ma'am, I don't know that answer right now,
I'd rather for you to say that
but
than
I'm
say-
going to get an answer from you. Me or somebody in my office is going to call you and give you a response to that. There's follow-up.
And then share that response with the community
With the
to
community.
let everyone know.
Got it. Okay.
Instead of in
So
secret.
you want a chief that's going to be responsive, right? And going to respond to the needs and the concerns that you have in a timely manner. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Dottie Clune, and among the changes I would like to see with the next leader is a highly innovative approach to the current situation that we're in. For example, if a very large percentage of the calls have to do with mental health and domestic violence issues, then where is the social work component within the policing department? If we are having, I understand it's a big challenge now to recruit and train officers, what ways can our police department collaborate and partner with social services agencies in the community to address the mental health and domestic violence issues in ways that we may need more people with those kinds of backgrounds working with the police department than people who are in the traditional policing roles. And similarly, in terms of innovation, I would like to see a change where there is more of an exploration of what is the role of mediation, what is the role of restorative practices within our police department as it relates to the community. And there's one other thing. Also, I would like to see that innovation include a strong advocacy component at the state and national level. So for example, a person earlier talked about her son having access to guns. There's some things related to guns that we cannot control at the local level, but we need to be advocating at the state and national level to make the changes that need to happen. So I think part of that innovation is a strong advocacy component.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, y'all police chief ain't gonna never get no sleep. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi. You know, I kind of have a different route on this. I think that the GRPD, the change I'd like to see to the department would be that they just explicitly look at the number of arrests they had in 2018 and cut that number by 50% or 30% and just decide how can we keep the community safe while arresting less people, and just straight up just do that. And then they can reallocate their budget in a way that addresses that, but stop just arresting people because you can do it, and stop overcharging them with bullshit, and just straight up, like explicitly start at the top. We arrested 28,000 people this year. Next year we're only going to arrest 20,000, and just nothing, like the community didn't get worse and we arrested less people. That's great. It's a win-win.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Russell Olmstead. I know that we already had a little bit of an opportunity to speak earlier today, but I wanted to bring this up because I feel it bears repeating, especially giving the demographic of this evening's event, that what I would very much like to see in the next police chief is a sense of responsibility to the Hispanic and Latinx communities. I feel that far too often it is left as an afterthought, especially in even in community engagement opportunities like this. And So I would very much like to see that change. I would also very much like to see the chief be able to step forward in a form of leadership to protect those in the Latinx and Hispanic and immigrant communities against ICE, and to put that into writing to say that that they will not cooperate with ICE and will not ask for documents. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Elaine, and one thing I'd like to see in a new police chief is a commitment to better training for police officers. Like you mentioned, a lot of police incidents involve mental illness, and I'd like a chief that recognizes the importance of making sure that police officers are trained to interact with people with mental illness. An alarmingly large number of police shootings across the country involve people with mental illness or disabilities. If police don't know how to interact with people who are having, mental difficulties or are deaf or otherwise, different populations, then it could result in tragedy that we don't need in Grand Rapids.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Do we have any other questions? What should be the top priority for the next leader of the Grand Rapids Police Department? What do you feel should be, if you had to prioritize the most important things for your city, what would you like that to be for your next chief? All right. I know you guys may be responding to a different question, so just feel to respond to either one, okay? So go ahead. Either one of you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, my name is Dorothy, and I'm a refugee migrant in this community, but I'm a U.S. citizen now. But then what I've seen going on now is that we have children who we bring here, and they're targeted. And what I mean by targeting the kids is that a child who has been in trouble once, they keep on criminalizing him. I'm saying criminalizing because most of the things that we see don't make sense. And then they end up being felons. So then when they become felons, then it's hard for them to even do anything. But the same kids are arrested. But what I would ask the new chief who is coming in to do is that please remove the Bolo Talon, because the Bolo Talon database is used in this city, which is targeting our children. They kind of know how to track those children, and we end up just crying. We are helpless. This is our home. This is one of the best cities in the whole country, but we look like we are in the jungle where the chief of police is part of the system, and they make it look like there's no judicial system here is working with the police chief, the prosecutor's office. So even if there's something genuine, you show them and you say, this is genuine, it keeps on going. And then if the police can stop falsifying police reports, also doing like where they tamper with evidence, I think this city would be the best. We can change it to be one of the best, because I could move. People tell me, why don't you move? Why should I move away from a city I love this much? So I think that if that can change, where we are seeing like people, I think that would be good, because I'm telling you right now, we have these refugee children from Africa. Most of them don't even go to college. They are just there. So what kind of a city are we building where the children don't even go to college? But if you go to the jail, all of them are there. You go to prison, all of them are there. So I'm just asking, if the new chief comes in, please change it. Don't follow what other people have done before, because every single chief who comes here goes deeper into the same thing which is going on. So there's no change, and we are looking for that change.
So let's find a way. What you're saying in the next chief, let's find a way, and other gentlemen that came before you, let's find a way in which we can find some other alternatives other than just trying to wrest ourselves out of this problem.
Yeah,
right?
and kind of bringing the charges, the same way thing he said.
Yes.
You're charged with one thing, they are making it 10 so that you can take a plea deal for 3. So if I do something wrong, let me get the same punishment for what I've done.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fairness, yes. Yes, sir.
My name is Sergio Sierra Reyes. I've been working in Grand Rapids. I live just a little bit outside of Grand Rapids, but I've been working in Grand Rapids for almost 20 years. Last night I was watching the session that you all did at the City Hall, and there was an elderly woman there who kept talking about how she loves police, how her kids love police, how her neighbors love police, how they do parties for police, and they bring donuts for police, and then when they're outside, they play basketball with police. And I was thinking, I want that. I want that for my community. I want to be able to invite a police officer to be in the Latino Community Coalition with us. I want a police officer to come to our parties, to come to our events. I want it to be in Latinx GR. I want to be able to feel safe and when a police officer pulls up behind me, or when I'm in another car with other Latinos or other people of color, I don't want the conversation to stop because there is a police officer somewhere behind us. And I think that this is a vision. I would like the next chief of police to come with that vision, to come from another community. I think we had this conversation earlier. I would like a next chief of police that comes with a vision, but that really believes that says, I'm going to come to Grand Rapids, and they have a problem with community police relations, but I want every single community in Grand Rapids, even communities of color, to have the same experience that white people in Grand Rapids Northwest Side have with police, with the same experience that white residents of the Northeast Side of Grand Rapids have with police. I want the Southwest Side to have that same experience with police, and also Southeast Side to have the same experience with police. And so I think that can only happen with a chief of police that has that vision and that comes in and is willing to work with other sectors and community and is willing to set the police department on the table and say, this is our police department, it belongs to all of us. And I need your help, other sectors, the nonprofit sector, the business sector, other sectors in the community, to say, how can we build up this police department so that it works for all of us and that we all feel safe around police, and that when police stops us, we roll our window down and we have a smile in our face for that police and are not afraid.
Great. And what you just described is community policing at its very best. That is community policing. It is a philosophy. You want the next police chief who has experience, who has already adopted the philosophy that what community policing is that it is a relationship between the police and the community. Regardless when they come to your home, to your community, whenever you have opportunities to share conversations, discussings, whatever the case may happen to be, those officers who work in your community, you're acquainted with them and they're acquainted with you. You are in partnership with each other. So wherever they go in this city, whatever home they respond to for calls of service, everyone is treated the same, with respect. That's how you develop the trust, and it comes over time. But we also have to recognize is that for many communities, particular communities of color, their experience and their history with police is very different oftentimes than those of the majority group. That is not anecdotal, that is factual, and it's based in science. So everybody would have a different starting point. But when that police officer responds to your home, that is a reflection of that chief. It'd be just like that chief coming to your door, only it's a police officer because he or she can't be in 1,000 places at the same time. But that is community policing, sir, that you just described. Because you want to feel in your community you're just as close to police as someone who lives on the north end of town. Right? That's what you want to experience. That's the relationship that you want to have. And quite frankly, what saddens me as I heard you talk, is that you want it bad and you want it desperately, and so there's a lot of other people in this room and across this community, and you don't feel that you have it, and some people don't feel that it ever come. But I don't believe that. It's coming, and that's why we're here tonight. All right? Yes, sir.
How you doing? My name's Divine. I would say the top priority for the next police chief need to be to eliminate the racial profiling, specifically in the city, and to empower, just going off of what you said and what Sergio just said, empower the community policing aspect through that money that they done set aside with that $1 million a year, and start really putting it to action, because it ain't really been put to action. So again, it was like smoke and mirrors to the community in regards to community and police relations. But I think the next chief top priority needs to definitely be to eliminate that racial profiling that historically has been going on within the communities in the city.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other thoughts, any other comments? We certainly want to be respectful of your time, and any other thoughts and comments? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry if I'm going twice, but I just noticed that nobody had mentioned that we have a community oversight board, and that community oversight board has no power. We had a friend that had a very bad experience with police, and she went to the community oversight board to talk to them, and they said, gosh, that's too bad. But there's really nothing they can do. So I would like to see one of the major changes be that board have more power to work with the police, and more power to have oversight. And going back to what you said about what we want is transparency, absolutely we want transparency, but transparency is not enough. If there is wrongdoing, there needs to be appropriate discipline, and that needs to be seen. And that goes back to what you said about we give the police legitimacy, and they have to earn it. But there is no legitimacy if there is no discipline.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Very well stated. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments? Yes, sir.
I'm thinking that one of the most important things for the chief of police is the ability to identify high-quality officers in the hiring process.
Yes.
So, because that's where you can make a long-term difference.
Yes, sir.
By staffing and promoting
That's right.
high-quality officers.
So you need a chief who's going to recognize we got to make sure we're recruiting the right type of people for this job. And those who have a mindset of a guardian mindset, not of a warrior mindset, but of a guardian mindset. So we have to recruit the right personalities for this job. We have to adequately train them, and then we got to supervise them, and we got to hold them accountable, right? From the top of the organization right down to the last person hired. Those days are gone. But we also have to remember, too, that there are bad people in the world. And there are bad people in our communities, and sometimes our police officers have to confront them. And sometimes a variety of different uses of force may be used. But when you have a trust in your police department, when you have legitimized your police department, whatever actions that they take, you feel a sense of confidence that they acted legally and lawfully and ethically, right? That's where we want to be. And that's the kind of chief that I hear you're saying you're looking for. Someone is going to lead from the front, set an example, be a role model for not just police officers, but for the community as a whole, right? Thank you all very much for being here. And I don't know, Mr. Washington. Oh, we got one more comment, but after this one, oh, we got a couple more questions? One more question. Oh, okay.
Along the hiring question, right now I get Facebook ads for the GRPD, and the GR Fire Department is trying to diversify, the force and what have you. What I understand is there's already a bad relationship between the GRPD, at least not the GRFD so much, but the GRPD and the community. And instead of diversifying and spending all this money in this marketing, why not spend money on trying to fix that relationship first? Because this is just a check-boxing kind of initiative, I think. Because if you know that we're not going to come out, why put that marketing out? Because then you can say, hey, we opened it up to people of color, but nobody showed up. Well, of course we didn't show up because we have a bad relationship to begin with. And so I think those marketing ads are ironic and a little insulting to the people.
What marketing ads are you referring to?
You get these Facebook ads. Currently, there's a hiring kind of initiative by the GRPD and the fire department, and they're trying to recruit more people of color. And my point is, you have to repair that relationship first before you try to bring us into the fold. And so if we don't have a good relationship, how can you expect me to come to your house?
You don't feel a sense of honesty.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so when we're talking about hiring, these are some of the issues that we need to fix first before we start bringing people in. We have to make sure that we have a good relationship with the community, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that will come out to these sessions and the education and the training as well.
Thank you. Point well taken. Point very well taken. So I want to move on to the next question. If you got a question, dear, please come up to the mic. But the last question is, what other things do you want the city manager to consider when selecting the next chief of police? What do you want him to consider in this selection process? What other things? I think everything that's up there already, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I have something.
Yes, ma'am.
Can the city manager consider whether the next chief has a track record for actually making the kinds of changes that we've been talking about tonight?
Yeah. And I kind of alluded to that very early on. But in this process, one thing I'm very certain, Gary and the work that he's going to be doing, and in the selection process for the city manager, and you all have an opportunity at some point, when it gets to a certain point in this process, assumingly, is that whoever interviews for this job and get to that point, one thing you have to always ask for, give me demonstrated successes. Tell me, show me, point me to where you have done things through your career that meet these requests that you all are making. Demonstrate that to me. Right? Give me an example. Give me a couple examples of that. That's where the rubber meets the road, when someone who has had that experience. But let's be also very honest. I can tell you over the course of my career, those points that I have hit, but I made mistakes along the way. But if someone can stand in front of you and say, yes, I could have did this better, but I learned that through this experience, that's someone who can be honest with you, and that's someone who have learned from that experience, right? That is hugely important. Yes, ma'am.
Just to say, I grew up in Detroit, and we knew our officers because they were us. They were our fathers, uncles, cousins, friends. And have you all looked into residency requirements? Because when you come from the outside, whoever this police chief is going to be, whoever the future officers are going to be, if you come from the outside, we are strangers. You don't know us. So what have you all considered about resident requirements?
Well, I can't respond to that, but let me reframe. No, don't go anywhere. Come back. This question is really more about, since it's not this question, but the question really more about what is it that you would say to a potential, or what is it that you would like the next chief to do in regards to what you're talking about? What would you like for him or her to at least think about?
Consider resident requirements for police officers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Consider that. Gives consideration for it. Explore it. What are the possibilities for that? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So I've had the opportunity to answer some of those other questions in another venue, but I wanted to talk about this one because assuming that we get, I'm going to feel assured that we're going to get what we want and what we've defined. So what I'd like the city manager to do is to consider the structures that need to be put in place to support this person. So for example, how can our public safety committee, where we've added civilians, how can it work in a robust way, a transparent way with the chief of police? How can we address our civilian appeals board that you mentioned? And what other opportunities do we have to perhaps create structures with other organizations so that we can provide good mental health services? So I'm sure there's a myriad of opportunities, but I'd like to have the city manager consider how to support the ideal candidate that we are determined to get. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I would like the city manager to thoroughly have the opportunity, if given several candidates to be on board, that you make it totally vetted by the community. Have the community come out and give input on who are you finalizing, who are you selecting, so we have a thorough understanding that we can check him out.
Or her out.
Or her out. Sorry.
All right. Mr. Washington, did you have anything you wanted to say in closing?
Thank you. Let's give our facilitators a big hand. We really appreciate your work in this, and know that you'll take to heart what we're doing. And it's important they hear it from you, because before I talk to anyone, before you talk to anyone, they're going to talk to them first. And they're going to vet them, and they're going to screen them and help us after we make the profile to make sure that the people they recommend bringing forth are those that meet that minimum threshold. And so I want to thank you. And do know, though, as I said, they've talked to a variety of people in the community, those that are in law enforcement, those that are in community, and so everyone has expectations. And so what we're going to do is take all of that and build the profile, and we're going to have a tall order for a police chief. I mean, we are going to have high expectations, which we should, and we will do our very best to make sure we hire the right person, because to me, this is the most important decision that we can make, that I can make, that will impact the trajectory of the department. It starts from the top. And one of the commissioners talked about structure. There's a lot of things we can do around the police chief, but in that police department, there is one person that affects the decision, police, and that's the chief. I can't order any officer to, I'm the city manager, but I can't order any officer to do anything. That is the job of the police. Now I have the authority to hire, to recruit and discipline the police chief, but beyond that, all the policing power and setting the expectations for the department is with the police chief. So I gotta get it right. Gotta make sure we have the right person, and that the community can trust. And this is valuable. Just in terms of the process down the road, the expectation is once we do, someone asked about the finalists, and will community get an opportunity to meet with the finalists. Once we identify the top finalists, and we don't have a number yet, whatever that number is, top 3, top 4, whatever that number is, that person will go through a very rigorous process, and it'll be the processes that were not made up. And I know that we've done, we've evaluated candidates before, and I'm saying we, with the last police chief, with Chief Rahinsky, there were several hurdles, but I think this is probably going to be the most vetted process, and where there may be several groups as well as several community meetings in which the candidate will be part of. And so, and they will be the town hall meetings where the police chief will be able to answer questions. The candidates will be able to answer questions just like this. There will be a televised stream. And so I am planning for this to be a very open and transparent process, but I'm not going to be rushed in making the right decision. And it's going to be what's best for this community, and I know that not everybody is going to be happy. I already know that, but I think everybody will feel that it will be a fair process. But I do remain hopeful. I am hopeful. All right. I do remain hopeful that we're going to get the right person, and that's my commitment. So with that, I want everyone to be safe. I do want to know that I appreciate you. I do want our officers to know, those who do ascribe to the very things that are up there, and there are officers that do that. I want to let all of our officers know I appreciate that, and this is what I expect out of them. I think you pointedly said that. I love the way that you said the police chief can't be everywhere, but the kind of police chief we want is establish a culture that any officer that goes anywhere represents the police chief, is an extension of him or her, and I think that's very, very possible. Thank you for coming. Have a good night.